Your life. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. We're learning today Parshas Chayei, which is the fourth portion of the Torah. It's the Parsha about the life of Sarah. It's the Parsha about the life of Sarah. Yeah. So it starts on page 131. We begin the portion. We're going to do a fly through here. We start with the death of Sarah, then her burial in the cave of Machpelah, which is the most hotly contested piece of real estate on planet Earth. Hebron, right? Which the most famous book in the history of the world is its title deed to the Jews. So the Bible, which is the most published book in the history of the world, is on the documents right here in the sixth Parsha, the purchase and acquisition of Hebron by Abraham for his wife Sarah as an eternal burial ground for the Jewish people. Yet somehow the United Nations didn't get that memo, and they've declared it a Muslim heritage site. In fact, this Shabbos every year is the Shabbos of solidarity with Hebron, where probably 10,000 people show up in Hebron. They spend the beautiful Shabbos there. They read this Parsha, and it's very beautiful. So that is the beginning of the portion. Then we find a wife for Isaac. Abraham insists that he gets her a wife from Abraham's family. And it's quite interesting, actually, here. I'd like to analyze a little deeper into this idea about how Abraham finds a wife for his son Isaac. Why does he find him a wife? What inspires him at the tender age of 137 to seek a wife for his son? Right? Why is Abraham suddenly seeking a wife for his son? Because he just had the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, at the very end of last week's Torah portion. That led to the death of Sarah. When the Satan mentioned to Sarah, Satan did this on purpose, was a setup at the beginning of the portion. In fact, you could read it yourself. Let's take a look. Page 132. Take a look at what happened. No, 133. Here, just take a look, just at this idea. Sarah's lifetime was 127 years. The years of Sarah's life were all equally good. This is 133. She enjoyed, you want a book? No, she enjoyed the advantages of old age in her youth and the advantages of youth in her old age. Furthermore, we know that because she gave birth at 90 years old. Furthermore, she retained the youthful beauty that she had miraculously regained before conceiving Isaac until her final days. And she died completely righteous, untainted by sin. How did she die? Word reached Sarah about the binding of Isaac. The shock of Abraham's attempted sacrifice of her son, coupled with the relief of hearing that he was spared, was too much for her to bear, and she died. It was actually the Satan who said that to her. He whispered in her ear that, did you know where Abraham went? And she said, no. He took Isaac to kill him. So she had a heart attack. She died. That was.
What does it say? It's just right here.
Yeah. But the whole thing was too much emotional turmoil for.
What does it say about the Satan?
That's in the Medrash. It's not brought over here. I thought it was brought here.
Yeah, it's not here.
But I think Rashi says it. Let me see. I think it was Rashi here. Was it in the footnotes?
No, I mean they have citations. It's like a brief.
A brief, yeah. Let me see.
Citation.
I'm looking in Rashi for a
It
second.
is.
Cliff notes.
Here. Yeah, Rashi says, I'm just gonna. It's not translated here, but I'm gonna free translate. The death of Sarah is adjacent to the passing, to the binding of Isaac, because she died as a result of the binding, as a result of the notification of the binding of Isaac, that her son was almost slaughtered. As soon as she heard that, her soul left and she died. So it was the Satan that told her that. It was brought down. Malach HaMavis. Exactly. It was Malach HaMavis. That's how he did it. So when Abraham realized that his wife was passing and that Isaac almost passed, he realized that we better get our act together with making progeny here. So that's why he looks for a wife for Isaac. Now, how does he do it? On page 137, he now approaches his son, his servant Eliezer, his faithful Syrian servant. Eliezer came from Damascus. And let's see what he tells him. God had blessed Abraham with a son in his old age, worthy of becoming his successor. And this son was everything to Abraham. So he felt responsible for guaranteeing the perpetuation of his line in order to ensure that the divine mission to which he had dedicated his life would continue. He said to his servant Eliezer, the elder member of his household who was in charge of all that he owned, I want you to swear to me in order for this type of oath to take force. The person taking the oath must hold a holy object while swearing. What does he want to swear to him? About the kind of wife that he's going to find him. We'll do the oath in a moment, but let's talk about the platform of the oath. This is PG-13. The only physical object so far that had been sanctified by virtue of it having been the object of an explicit commandment from God is my reproductive organ, which he had commanded me to circumcise. Therefore, place your hand under my thigh, a euphemism, for the right, i.e., a reproductive organ. Folks, you are on camera.
Oh, sorry.
So place your hand under my thigh for this purpose, which is an amazing, amazing thing. Let's just see the oath. I will bind you by an oath to God, right? Ever since coming to this land, I've been working successfully towards making its inhabitants aware of the existence of God and his involvement in human affairs. In their eyes, therefore, he is now not only the God of heaven, but now he is also the God of earth. Nonetheless, the citizens have not yet sufficiently internalized this awareness, for it had to have changed them for the better in any profound way. It still therefore remains lip service for mankind to recognize that God is the God of the earth as well. Therefore, I adjure you with this oath not to take a wife for my son from among the daughters of the Canaanites in whose midst I live. Instead, I want you to go to my former land, to Haran, to Iraq, the place where my family still lives, and take a wife from amongst them for my son Isaac. Even though I've been away from my family for 65 years, and the distance has prevented me from influencing them directly, they are nonetheless scions of the royal firstborn line of Shem. Shem is the son of Noah. And I've inherited its aristocratic upbringing, noble gentility, and family traditions and teachings. Right? So this is the oath that he wants him to make. Go to Iraq, get me a wife from his first cousins. Now, why, pray tell, does Eliezer have to make this oath in such an awkward manner of holding under Abraham's thigh? And here we're introduced to this magnificent concept, which is the idea of the novelty of Matan Torah, the novelty of Sinai. You see, as Abraham clearly references over here, God was the God of heavens, and now he's the God of the earth, but he still isn't enough recognized as the God of the earth.
Sure.
Right? My life's mission is to make him the God of the earth. How did he do that? I spoke about it on Shabbos, when he would coerce his guests into admitting or recognizing or thanking God. And that was a lifetime achievement of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob, was about bringing divine consciousness and awareness to the world. Now, until the Torah was given, Hashamayim shamayim lashem v'aretz natan livnei adam. The heavens is the domain of God, and the earth is the domain of man. God had no home in this world. God had no sanctuary in this world. The novelty of Mount Sinai was now Vayered Havaya al Har Sinai. I quote the verse, and Havaya descended upon mountain of Sinai. So for the very first time in the history of the world, God actually revealed himself on this earth. And from that moment on, the glass ceiling was shattered. From that moment on, this world was able to become holy. What does that mean? Whenever we do a mitzvah with a physical object, that physical object now retains sanctity. It actually becomes holy to the point that if you do take a leather from a cow and ink and write the ink on parchment, Shema Yisrael, write it as a mezuzah, now that scroll actually becomes holy. Not only reverence for what it represents, but inherently it becomes holy. The Torah scroll is holy. The tefillin is holy. The physical object with which you observe any mitzvah actually retains varying degrees of sanctity within it, which means that godliness is actually captured within that physical object. It's retained within the object. The book is holy. Well, that's why we kiss a book if it falls on the floor. Not only because we feel bad that God seems to be potentially disrespected. It's because this is holy, right? That is the novelty of Sinai ever since Mount Sinai. We Jews, everything we touch turns to light. Everything we touch, we do with divine intent, with a holy purpose, And since Sinai, the trail was blazed. The pipe was open to allow the flow of holiness into this physical world. So every time we do a mitzvah with a physical object, that is what we're doing. We're channeling holiness. Before the Torah was given, however, this was not the case. Before the Torah was given, holiness was not retained within any physical object. Therefore, for example, in a few weeks' time, you seeking something, Dan?
Yeah, my book.
Oh, before the Torah was given, holy is the word. Shabbos candles, yes, they're holy. What do we say about Hanukkah candles? S-Bug from Melbourne, Australia. What do we say about Hanukkah candles? Haneros halalu kodesh. These candles are holy. That's exactly the prayer that we say. Lahadlik ner shel Shabbos kodesh. To sanctify or to ignite the candle of the holy Shabbos. The candles become holy. Now, what do we do with books, Torah books that are no longer usable?
Bury them.
You bury them in a geniza. A geniza. What's a geniza? A geniza is a is a way of disposing very respectfully of sacred objects. You know, you've heard of the Cairo geniza, the Aleppo geniza. These are ancient, ancient corners of synagogues where they've dumped, the broken books into tefillin and talesim and everything else, and they found them hundreds of years later. If you go to Prague, where the golem of Prague is, where's the golem of Prague buried? He's upstairs, which is bricked up and sealed, underneath a massive mound of Torah books, right? Which is the whole story in and of itself. I'm getting into it. So the Maharal's creation, yeah. So what happens here is that before the Torah was given, sanctity was not retained. Sanctity was drawn but not retained. Let me give an example. So we know that Yaakov, the Medrash tells us that Yaakov laid tefillin.
How could he do that before we know it?
Well, no, we know that our forefathers studied Torah. That's no secret. How do we know they studied Torah? When the giant oak came to Abraham to tell him that his nephew Lot had been taken captive in the portion 2 weeks ago, we know that Avram was baking matzah. In last week's Torah, because it was Pesach, which is interesting because it's a testimonial mitzvah. I mean, the Jews hadn't left Egypt in a rush yet, right? But Abraham recognized Kabbalistically that the energy of this day is this kind of food. And now we know today from Chassidus that matzah is not just a testimonial, sentimental reminder of an ancient hurry, but rather the matzah actually represents humility. The bread that doesn't rise, the lack of ego, the chametz is put away. That which rises, the yeast is sent away, and the matzah remains, which is the ego, humility. What did Abraham serve as guests in last week's Torah portion? The 3 angels that came to visit him that he thought were mortal. Well, how was it kosher? First, he served them dairy, and only afterwards he served them meat. Right? We know Noah. How many animals did Noah bring into the ark? 2 of each animal. Except for the kosher animals, in which he brought 14 of each, 7 pairs. So how did he know which were the kosher animals? Noah. I mean, seriously, this is 4,500 years ago, 1,500 years before the Torah was given. What? How do you know they had yarmulkes on? Oh, they had the yarmulkes on, the kosher animals. We even know that our ancestors wore yarmulkes. How do we know they wore yarmulkes? Walking through the desert in that heat, you think they didn't wear a hat? So Yaakov, we know that Yaakov laid tefillin. How did he lay tefillin? You may remember the story. It comes up in a few weeks' time. Yaakov was actually the father of genetics. You think that it was Gregory Mendel, the monk, who came up with the peas. I have a whole analysis on. The Torah gets into detail about the spotted, the speckled, the freckled, the lined sheeps and goats, and I have a whole thesis on this as to how Jacob was actually working on dominant and recessive genes, genetics. And the Torah tells us that there was a vision of an angel that showed him how the animals were copulating. And he was able to recognize on a subatomic level how various animals had, 2 genes within them, or the dominant and recessive genes. So Jacob was actually visualizing the way that they were going to be next generation extensions. So he was able to separate the the dominant genes that he didn't want and maintain, because he was given only the weakest of the sheep. So he would take two, when he saw a weak sheep, when he saw a sheep, the 25 percentile sheep that had the undesirable trait, right? Then he knew that they had two dominant genes, right? The black sheep, effectively. He was able to see that it had two dominant genes because that was the only way that it was able to have that. And those were the animals that he put together, the ones with two dominant genes, and that's how he built his flock, right? But that's a bit of a side note. So it says that while Jacob was putting these animals together, it says he actually the Talmud says, we know this elsewhere, that when the Romans captured the Jewish slaves, they knew the Jewish boys and girls were gorgeous, physically beautiful, so they tied them to their bedposts as they copulated. The Romans themselves, right? Why? Because they wanted to visualize beautiful faces, not to arouse them, not to arouse themselves, but to visualize beautiful faces in the hopes that their children would be such progeny. We know that Rabbi Yochanan, this is a very unusual piece of Talmud. Rabbi Yochanan was one of the four most beautiful men who ever lived. And the Talmud asks, if so, why didn't he make it to the Forbes 4? Why didn't he make it into the Talmud list of four most beautiful men who ever lived? There's a list. There is a list. And the Talmud answers, the reason, please don't take this personally, the Talmud says that the reason why he doesn't make it into the list of the four most beautiful men who ever lived is because he didn't look masculine, he didn't have a beard.
See, that'll tell you guys.
Okay. Anyways, so back on. So Rabbi Yochanan, why am I telling you about Rabbi Yochanan? Because he would make it his business to sit at the entrance of the mikveh, at the exit of the mikveh. The exit of the mikveh. What's that for? He would sit at the exit of the mikveh, which is where the women come out on the night of ovulation, right, to be with their husbands, and he wanted them to visualize his face because he was beautiful. I mean, this is an amazing piece of Talmud here, right? I mean, like, whoa, right? He wanted them to see his face in the hopes that they would have children as beautiful as he. Now, this is way beyond surface level interpretation here, which sounds like really weird. It was about having children that were spiritually beautiful, right? Now, why am I saying this? Is because Jacob understood the same idea. So when the animals were drinking, when the females were drinking, somehow the males would come behind them, and they would do their thing. So what he did was that the deal with his father-in-law was that the speckled and the spotted ones were his, but the one color ones were not. So what he did was that he took these sticks and he kind of cut notches in them, right, so that they look speckled, so that they'd see speckles and dots and spots, so that would be the kind of kids that they would have. The Medrash tells us that those were the manifestation of his tefillin. Those sticks. Like the straps that we have, they were the manifestation of his tefillin. So now, they weren't the same tefillin that we have, obviously. Tefillin weren't even commanded yet, but because our ancestors, our forefathers, were privy to the teachings of Torah, they knew about it, and they wanted to engage in it, but it wasn't commanded yet. The fact that it wasn't commanded means that they couldn't truly manifest it in this world. So what they did was, without a physical manifestation like we do, they did a spiritual manifestation of the same, like Abraham's matzahs, Yitzchak's charity tithes, and Yaakov's tefillin. We know Abraham came up with the morning prayer, Shachris. Yitzchak came up with afternoon mincha, and Yaakov came up with the evening prayer, Ma'ariv, right? So they did so in a spiritual sense, but there was no retention. There was no retention of holiness whatsoever within those sticks. After, the Medrash says, after he was finished with the sticks, you could throw them away. You see where I'm going with this? There was one exception. There was one mitzvah that Abraham was indeed commanded to do. And what was that? Was indeed commanded to do. What was the one mitzvah Abraham was commanded to do?
Children.
No, that was not his command. That was to Noah. The one command was bris. Lachnisoi bivrisoi shel Avraham Avinu. We said every bris. We say the blessing to bring him into the covenant of Abraham, our forefather. Right. So the bris of Abraham was the one mitzvah that he was commanded, and therefore Abraham is desperately seeking now. I want you to make an oath on the holy Torah, but I don't have a Torah. Right. So what's a holy object that I can give you? And that was under my thigh. That was under his thigh, which was the one commandment that he had. That was the one thing that actually did become holy. And now we can apply this idea. We can apply this idea to our lives as well. If you think about for a moment about what kind of influence you have on this world, you can sanctify this world. And what have you already made holy? Think about it. So your tefillin is holy. Your mezuzahs are holy. But is your office holy? Is your bank account holy? I'm sure it is. You give charity, right? So by the act of charity, when you give 10%, then the other 90% becomes holy. That's what's happening. The other 90% becomes holy. When you study Torah on your phone becomes holy.
That's what I was going to ask you. So when I do my morning prayers,
Yes.
Reading it on here, this
Yes.
becomes holy.
Yes.
You're holy.
Yeah, exactly. It's a beautiful thing, right? It's a bit conflicted because of what else is on there. So,
Especially your phone.
right, there's a bit of a conflict, which is actually an interesting question. I wonder if your phone is to become holy, then is it considered a desecration of your phone to do things that are unholy on it? Interesting, right? It's interesting.
A phone could be holy.
Well, if you read Torah, study Torah.
You read Torah, study
Oh,
Torah.
okay.
If you're watching YouTube right now on your computer screen,
You have
right?
no control on what people send you. So it's in your face.
Well,
They keep
well,
on
you
holding
do have
control.
control on what you choose to engage in and open, right?
Sometimes
So
you
it's
get a
like your
little
thoughts. You don't have control of which thoughts enter your head, but you do have choice of which thoughts endure in your head, right? So this is this very powerful message that we're learning here from Abraham, and this very unusual story of how he makes this oath is that the novelty of Torah is that now holiness is retained. In the words of the Medrash, here's how the Medrash says it. The Medrash says that in the beginning there were two kingdoms, the kingdom of Syria and the kingdom of Rome. And there was a rule, there was an iron curtain that the residents of Syria could not descend down to Rome, and the residents of Rome could not go up to Syria. This is quoting from the Medrash. Then one day, the iron curtain was removed, and now there was a free flow of travel from Syria to Rome and back and forth. So too, says the Medrash, there were two kingdoms, the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of earth. The kingdom of heaven was unable to descend down to earth. Holiness could not come down to this world, and physicality could not, human beings could not rise up to become sanctified. There were humans and there was God. But then came the Torah and it shattered the iron curtain, which is why it says Vayir and Havaya al Sinai and Havaya descended down to Mount Sinai, and Moses rises up to the mountain, right? And this is the representation of how, from this point on, holiness is indeed retained and maintained within this physical world. So in this show, I would hope that holiness is present. Is holiness present in your home in Mirasol? Is holiness present on the beach?
Juno Beach.
Juno Beach. Jew, yes.
Juno.
Do you know
Right?
where it is?
Yes, please.
Right. And that's the big question. That's what we're called upon to do. Let me tell you one more quick thing over here, guys. Even though I'm running out of time, but let me tell you one more idea. Okay, so he sends a servant, right? I'm gonna ask you to turn the page. No, sorry, he keeps on going. Okay, stay on the same page.
No, I know 137. Oh, number 5. This is,
What happens if
Here, so I'm going to read further, okay? Instead, you must go to my former land, to Haran, the place where my family still. Verse number 5. The servant said to him, perhaps the woman will not wish to follow me to this land. Should I take a son back to the land from which you departed? After all, if you prefer that I take a wife for Isaac from amongst your family members rather than from among the people whom you have been influencing and living with the past 65 years, then it should not matter where the couple live afterwards. Right.
don't bring my son
If you
there.
prefer, in other words, yes, he says, Abraham said, be most careful, do not take my son back there. True. I would prefer that my future daughter-in-law be of my family's lineage, but lineage alone does not suffice. When she and my son marry, they must go together in a fitting environment, which is not to be found anywhere else but here. Although it is true that the people of this land only pay lip service to the gods' involvement in human affairs, at least they do that. In contrast, the people I used to live, consider God as only the God of heaven. Although I did convince them of his existence, I did not succeed in convincing them that he is involved with human affairs. So Abraham attributes that to the holiness of the land of Israel, where the people, and we learned this in Vayadaita, that in the holiness of the land of Israel, there the perception, the veil is thinner.
Veil is very thin, right.
This is how they conceived of God when he took me away from my father's house in Haran, and all the more so when he took me away from the land of my family, Ur of the Chaldeans. And this is, sorry, I'm on page 136. How they still conceive of him. Moreover, God spoke concerning me, and even swore to me in the covenant between the halves, saying, to your offspring will I give this land, clearly indicating that my son should remain here. I'm therefore confident that he will send his angel. Now, this is the key I wanted to show you. I'm therefore confident, said angel. It said God. It said Abraham, I'm sorry. Yeah, Abraham says, I'm therefore confident that he will send his angel ahead of you to orchestrate events to your advantage in advance. With his help, you'll take a wife for my son from there. Now this is amazing. So Abraham tells Eliezer, Yishlach malachol lefanecha. God will send his angel before you to give you
Ease the way.
to ease the way. Now what happens? I'm going to say this very briefly because the next class is about to start. First of all, it's a 17-day journey to Haran, to Iraq. He makes it in one day, called Kfitzas Haderech. It's the miraculous jumping of the journey, which means like the land folded beneath him, he made it over there. That's the first miracle. Second miracle, he gets there, and he prays to God. He says, please God, send me the righteous wife. And he says, I'm going to ask a girl for one of these girls here at the well, at the bar. I'm going to ask one of them for water. The one that agrees not only to give me water, but for my camels too, that'll be the one. He didn't even finish his prayer when the girl starts coming out towards him with a pitcher, right? So you clearly see that the story is, you clearly see the angel is like pushing events towards him. Now, let's take a look. So God will send his angel before you, right? I'm going to fast forward to the negotiation with her brother and her parents, really. I'm going to fast forward to page 143 here. Page 143, Eliezer recounts his mission. So we'll do this quickly. Food was served, but Eliezer said, I will not eat until I've spoken my piece. Lavan said, speak. Eliezer began, I am Abraham's servant. God greatly blessed my master, and he prospered. He granted him flocks, cattle, silver, and gold, bondsmen and bondswomen, camels and donkeys. My master's wife, Sarah, bore my master a son after she had grown old, and he gave him all that he owned. At this point, Eliezer showed him the document, attesting to the fact that all Abraham's wealth was now given to Isaac. My master bound me by an oath, do not take a wife for my son from among the daughters of Canaanites in whose land I live, unless you go to my father's house, to my family, select a wife for my son from amongst them, propose a marriage to her, and if she refuses to come back, with you. Unless you first go to my father's house, to my family, select a wife for my son. Oh, don't get a daughter from the Canaanites unless she refuses, okay? I said to my master, in that case, in the end, you will certainly approach me and ask me to give my daughter to your son as a wife. Eliezer was hoping that Abraham would do the shidduch with his own daughter. For the maiden whom I will choose from amongst your family members in Haran will certainly not agree to come back with me. Eliezer is hoping that Abraham was going to say, you know what, abort mission, we'll just marry your daughter because you're my servant, right? But he said to me, no, God before whom I have always walked will send his angel with you. What did he say before? Before you. Now he says with you, and make your mission successful, and you will take a wife for my son from amongst my family members and from my father's house. Eliezer, now what's the difference? Why did Eliezer change it? What do you think? What's the reason? So clearly the miracle was before him. What would happen if Eliezer would have said to Lavan, God sent the angel before me? Then what?
You might buy into that. You might accept that.
With me.
Then Lavan would say, well, then what do you need me for? Then what do you need me for? And maybe Lavan would even say, actually, show me. I'm not agreeing.
Where is he? Right.
I'm not agreeing. Show me your angel. You said that the angel, the deal's already done before you even asked me. So first of all, it's insulting. You don't need my opinion. Second of all, prove it to me. Let's see how they explain it over here. Eliezer could not, of course, tell Bethuel and Lavan, the father and brother, that God had guaranteed him success in advance before me. So he said only that God had promised to send his angel with him rather than before him, as Abram had said. He did, however, note that God had promised to make his mission successful, hinting at least that it would be fruitless for Bethuel to attempt to oppose it. Right, so it's interesting. When it comes to negotiations, sometimes you gotta modify your leverage. Right, you gotta sometimes modify your leverage to say, you gotta change the wording a little bit so as not to insult the people on the other side of the table. Right. So what's amazing is that Abraham has this gates of trust attitude. God will send the angel before you. It's going to be good. I have no doubt. You're wondering, Eliezer was wondering, maybe it's not work out. I'm sure she's not going to agree to send the angel, right? I'm sorry. I'm sure they're not going to agree to send the wife. Just go for my daughter. Eliezer's the doubting Thomas over here, which is probably the reason why Abraham did not want to marry his family, because you don't have trust. You might have faith, but you don't have trust, right? Bitachon comes Abraham. And he says, it's going to be good. I know it's going to be good. Go out there, get her ready, right? So that's what he does. Eliezer goes, he brings back the wife. And Eliezer, you can see, he's a student of Abraham. He buys into the whole idea. And eventually he says, it's going to be fruitless right? Bottom line is that in the negotiation, didn't want to insult him. So he said, look, remember the gates of trust requires that you're going to have to do your own effort. God doesn't just make miracles for you. He wants you to disguise that. We've learned about this idea. He wants you to disguise it behind the laws of nature. So you can't just come and say, whether you like it or not, your daughter's coming with me. It's happening. What he had to do is make it feel like the guy was making the decision, the father or the brother were making the decision. And that's how it was close.
Good negotiation anyway.
Right. But that's what we call the doctrine of divine anonymity, where God is hiding behind natural means because he doesn't want it to be an open miracle. He wants you to make an effort. And we learned that in the gates of trust so that it looks like it wasn't a miracle, right? And that's what Eliezer is doing. So we actually watch the doctrine of blind trust at play right here in this story where Abraham knows it's going to be successful. Eliezer modifies the wording so as to make it look like it's actually a natural means. And that's how everything ends up in the end, where they basically say at the very end, they basically said, we're not sure. And the daughter says, listen, I'm not asking you, dad and brother, I'm going. So they said, okay, maybe we'll get a little time. And she said, listen, I'm going. So that was the end of the story. Okay, let's wrap it up here, guys. Eliezer was righteous, followed Avram's final instruction, and knew that God was in this. The question is, Andy, how much did he buy into Abraham's degree of consciousness? It's not black or white, from or not from. It's not that. We've learned now in recent years together that there's degrees of religiosity, there's degrees of faith. There's, today's observance of Torah is tomorrow's apostasy, heresy, because if I'm holding faith today and tomorrow I'm holding a trust, then today is weak faith compared to tomorrow. Okay? And that's the idea. Thank you very much, everybody. Great to study with you all. Shalom and have a wonderful day.
Wonderful trip. Safe trip.